Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to the live studios at Wisteria Cottage, Hode Farm, on the outskirts of Folkestone in Kent, southeast England. We're here on a very special evening. This is the launch of the Facebook fan page, upon which you can watch all of these live streamings of my daily readings of Srimad-Bhagavatam. We welcome you all affectionately. We're here with two of the stalwart devotees of the Kent Yatra, Priyakund Prabhu and Radharaman Prabhu. And we welcome everyone, whether you're watching live or whether you're going to be watching at another time at your convenience. And for those of you who don't know, we're about to start our reading of Srimad-Bhagavatam. But before we start, we recite the glorification by Srila Sanatana Goswami, the senior disciple of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his glorification of the Srimad-Bhagavatam in 5 verses, called Srimad-Bhagavata Mahima Stotram. And these prayers are found in the Sri Krishna Lila Stava, text 412 through 416. And it goes like this. Sarva Shastabdi Piyusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhantaratnadya Sarvalokai Kadrik Prada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of light to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabho Kalidwandoditaditya Shri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master, Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshakshadayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguru Man Mahadana Man Nistadaga Mad Bhagya Mad Ananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu saduta dayin atini chotata kada hanamunchagadachin mam premnarit kantayospura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Canto 10, Srimad-Bhagavatam, Chapter 87, Prayers by the Personified Vedas. We're beginning with text 33. There's 50 texts in this chapter, and we're going to try to reach the end of the chapter on this auspicious launch day of the site. The different personified Vedas are one by one offering their prayers to the Supreme Lord in the form of an analytical an analysis, rather, of the glories of the Lord. The mind is like an impetuous horse that even persons who have regulated their senses and breath cannot control. Those in this world who try to tame the uncontrolled mind, but who abandon the feet of their spiritual master, encounter hundreds of obstacles in their cultivation of various distressful practices. O unborn Lord, they are like merchants on a boat in the ocean who have failed to employ the helmsman. Purport: to become qualified to attain love of Godhead, the mature fruit of liberation, one must first subdue the rebellious material mind. Though difficult, this can be achieved when a person replaces his addictions to sense gratification with a taste for the higher pleasures of spiritual life. But only by the favor of the representative of Godhead, the spiritual master, can one gain this taste. Could you look and see if this is blocking my face or not? The spiritual master opens the eyes of the disciples to the wonders of the transcendental realm, as indicated in the Gayatri prayers by the seed mantra of divine knowledge, Aing. The Mundaka Upanishad states, Tadvijnanartam sagarun eva bigachet samitpani shotriyam brahmanishtam. To understand these things properly, one must humbly approach, with firewood in hand, a spiritual master who is learned in the Vedas and firmly devoted to the absolute truth. And the Canto Upanishad declares, quote, "This realization, my dear boy, cannot be acquired by logic. It must be spoken by an exceptionally qualified spiritual master to a knowledgeable disciple." Non-Vaishnavas often disregard the importance of surrendering to a spiritual master who stands in an authorized line of disciplic succession. Relying instead on their own abilities, proud yogis and jnanis exhibit their apparent success to impress the world, but their glory is but temporary. Quote, "The minds of non-devotees who engage in such practices as pranayama are not fully cleansed of material desires. Thus, O king, material desires are again seen to arise in their minds. On the other hand, a humble, steadfast devotee of Lord Vishnu and of the Vaishnavas is assured of easy victory over the stubborn mind. He need not concern himself with performing the eightfold system of yoga or taking other such measures to keep his mind steady. Sarvam chaitad gurau bhaktya purusha yanjasa jayet. A person can easily obtain all these goals simply by being devoted to his spiritual master. Otherwise, a non-devotee may conquer his senses and vital air and still fail to tame his mind, which will continue to run wild like an unbroken horse. He will suffer unending anxiety over the troublesome execution of various spiritual practices, and in the end, he will remain just as lost in the vast material ocean as he ever was. The analogy given here is very appropriate. A group of merchants who hastily enter upon a sea voyage with expectations of great profit, but who fail to hire a competent helmsman for their boat, will simply experience great difficulty. The Bhagavatam declares the importance of the bona fide spiritual master in many places, such as this verse from the 11th canto, quote, "The human body, which can award all benefit in life, is automatically obtained by the laws of nature. although it is a very, very rare achievement. This human body can be compared to a perfectly constructed boat, having the spiritual master as the captain and the instructions of the personality of Godhead as favorable winds, impelling it on its course. Considering all these advantages, a human being who does not utilize his human life to cross the ocean of material existence must be considered the killer of his own soul. Therefore, the first business of one who takes human life seriously is to find out a spiritual master who can guide him in Krishna consciousness. Srila Sridhar Swami prays, quote, O transcendentally blissful Guru, when my mind finally achieves a place at your lotus feet, all the tiresome labor of my spiritual practices will be finished, and by your mercy I will experience the greatest happiness. Text 34. To those persons who take shelter of you, you reveal yourself as the Supersoul, the embodiment of all transcendental pleasure. What further use have such devotees for their servants, children, or bodies, their wives, money or houses, their land, good health, or conveyances? And for those who fail to appreciate the truth about you and go on pursuing the pleasures of sex, what could there be in this entire world? A place inherently doomed to destruction and devoid of significance that could give them real happiness. Purport. Devotional service to Lord Vishnu is considered pure when one's sole desire is to please the Lord. Situated in that perfect consciousness, a Vaishnava has no further interest in worldly gains and is thus excused from any obligation to perform ritual sacrifices and follow austere practices of yoga. As the Mundaka Upanishad states, Pariksha lokan karma chitan brahmano nirvedam ayan nastyakrita kritena. When a Brahmana recognizes that elevation to the heavenly planets is merely another accumulation of karma, he becomes renounced and is no longer corrupted by his actions. The Brihad, Aranyaka, and Katha Upanishads confirm, quote, when a person completely gives up all the sinful desires he is harboring in his heart, he exchanges mortality for eternal spiritual life and attains real pleasure in the absolute truth. And the Gopal Tapani Upanishad concludes, quote, devotional service is the process of worshipping the Supreme Lord. It consists of fixing one's mind upon Him by becoming disinterested in all material designations, both in this life and the next. This indeed is true renunciation. The items the Shrutis mention here are all measures of worldly success. Swajana, servants. Atma, a beautiful body. Sutaha, children to be proud of. Daraha, an attractive and competent spouse. Dhanam, financial assets. Dhamma, a prestigious residence. Dara, holdings of land. Asavaha, health and strength. And Rataha, cars and other vehicles that display one's status. But one who has begun to experience the ecstasy of devotional service loses all attraction for these things, since he finds real satisfaction in the Supreme Lord, the reservoir of all pleasure, who enjoys by sharing his own pleasures with his servitors. We are each free to choose the course of our life. We can either dedicate our body, mind, words, talents, and wealth to the glory of God, or else we can ignore Him and struggle instead for our personal happiness. The second path leads to a life of slavery to sex and ambition, in which the soul never feels real satisfaction, but instead suffers continually. Vaishnavas are distressed to see materialists suffering in this way, and so they always strive to enlighten them. Srila Sridhar Swami prays, Bhajato hi bhavan sakshat paramananda chittanaha atmaeva kim atakrityam tuchja dara sutadibihi. For those who worship you, you become their very self, their spiritual treasure of topmost bliss. What further use have they for the mundane wives, children, and so forth? Text 35. Sages free from false pride live on this earth by frequenting the sacred pilgrimage sites and those places where the Supreme Lord displayed his pastimes. Because such devotees keep your lotus feet within their hearts, the water that washes their feet destroys all sins. Anyone who even once turns his mind towards you, the ever-blissful soul of all existence, no longer dedicates himself to serving family life at home, which simply robs a man of his good qualities. Purport. The qualification of an aspiring sage is that he has learned about the Absolute Truth from standard authorities and developed a sober mood of renunciation. To develop his capacity for discriminating the important from the unimportant, such a person often wanders from one holy site to another, taking advantage of the association of great souls who frequent or reside in these places. If in the course of his travels the aspiring sage can begin to realize the Supreme Lord's lotus feet in the core of his heart, he will be released from the illusion of false ego and from the painful bondage of lust, envy, and greed. Though he may still go to places of pilgrimage to bathe away his sins, the now purified sage has the power to sanctify others with the water that washes his feet and with the realized instructions he imparts. Such a sage is described by the Mundaka Upanishad. Quote, "The knot in the heart is pierced, all misgivings are cut to pieces, and the chain of fruitive actions is terminated when one sees the Supreme Lord everywhere within all superior and inferior beings." To sages who have reached this stage, the Mundaka Upanishad thus pays homage. Quote, "Obeisances to the topmost sages. Obeisances to the topmost sages." Putting aside the affectionate company of wives, children, friends, and followers, saintly Vaishnavas travel to the holy Dhammas, where the Supreme Lord's worship can be most successfully prosecuted. Places such as Vrindavan, Mayapur, and Jagannath Puri, or anywhere else where sincere devotees of Lord Vishnu congregate. Even those Vaishnavas who have not taken sannyas and still live at home or in their guru's ashram, but who have once tasted just a drop of the sublime pleasure of devotional service, will also have little inclination to meditate on the pleasures of a materialistic family life, which robs a person of his discretion, determination, sobriety, tolerance, and peace of mind. Srila Sridhar Swami prays, "My dear Lord, when I will give up all sense gratification and engage incessantly in meditating upon you, and when I will take up residence in the hermitages of saintly devotees, free from false pride, then I will become fully immersed in the inundation of nectar pouring from the devotees' lotus mouths as they chant sacred narrations about you. And then, O Lord Narahari, I will never again have to take a material body." Text 36. It may be proposed that this world is permanently real because it is generated from the permanent reality. But such an argument is subject to logical refutation. Sometimes, indeed, the apparent non-difference of a cause and its effect fails to prove true. And at other times, the product of something real is illusory. I'll read this verse again because I missed a couple of important points. Bear with me. Hare Krishna. It may be proposed that this world is permanently real because it is generated from the permanent reality. But such an argument is subject to logical refutation. Sometimes, indeed, the apparent non-difference of a cause and its effect fails to prove true. And at other times, the product of something real is illusory. Furthermore, this world cannot be permanently real, for it partakes of the natures of not only the absolute reality, but also the illusion disguising that reality. Actually, the visible forms of this world are just an imaginary arrangement resorted to by a succession of ignorant persons in order to facilitate their material affairs. With their various meanings and implications, the learned words of your Vedas bewilder all persons whose minds have been dulled by hearing the incantations of sacrificial rituals. Purport. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur, the Upanishads teach that this created world is real but temporary. This is the understanding that devotees of Lord Vishnu adhere to. But there are also materialistic philosophers, like the proponents of Jaimini Rishi's Karma Mimamsa, who claim that this world is the only reality and exists eternally. For Jaimini, the cycle of karmic action and reaction is perpetual, with no possibility of liberation into a different transcendental realm. This viewpoint, however, is shown to be fallacious by a careful examination of the Upanishadic mantras, which contain many descriptions of a higher spiritual existence. For example, Sadeva Saumyedam Agra Asit Ekam Eva Vidityam. My dear boy, the Absolute Truth alone existed prior to this creation, one without a second. Also, Vijnanam Anandam Brahma. The Supreme Reality is divine knowledge and bliss. Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad. In this prayer of the personified Vedas, the materialist argument is summed up in the words Sata idam utitam sat. The visible world is permanently real because it is generated from the permanent reality. In general, this argument goes that that which is produced from a certain thing is composed of that thing. For example, earrings and other ornaments made from gold share gold's substance. Thus, the Mimamsa logicians conclude, since the world we know it is a manifestation of an eternal reality, it is also eternally real. But the Sanskrit ablative expression sataha, from the eternal reality, implies a definite separation of cause and effect. Therefore, what is created from sat, the permanent reality, must be significantly different from it. In other words, temporary. In this way, the argument of the materialist is flawed because it proves just the opposite of what it is intended to prove. Tarka hatam. Namely, that the world as we know it is all that exists, that it is eternal, and that there is no separate transcendental reality. In defense, the Mimamsakas may claim that they are not trying to prove non-difference per se, but rather trying to disprove the possibility of difference, or in other words, the possibility of any reality separate from the known world. This attempt to support the Mimamsa argument is easily refuted by the phrase vyabhichariti kvacha. That is to say, there are counterexamples that deviate from the general rule. Sometimes indeed the source is very different from what it produces, as in the case of a man and his young son, or of a hammer and the destruction of a clay pot. But, the Mimamsas reply, the creation of the universe is not the same kind of causation as your counterexamples. The father and the hammer are only efficient causes, whereas the sat is also this universe's ingredient cause. This reply is anticipated by the words kvachamrisha, and sometimes the effect is illusory. In the case of the false perception of a snake, where there is a rope on the ground, the rope is the snake, illusion's ingredient cause, differing in many respects from the imagined snake, most obviously in its being real. The Mimamsakas once more rejoin, but the ingredient cause of the illusory snake is not just the rope by itself, it is the rope plus the observer's ignorance, avidya. Since avidya is not a substance, the snake it produces is called an illusion. Yet the same is true, the personified Vedas reply, in the case of the universe's creation from sat in conjunction with ignorance, tato bhaya yuk. Here, the unreal element of illusion, maya, is the living being's misconception that their own bodies and other changing material forms are permanent. But, rejoin the Mimamsakas, our experience of this world is valid because the things we experience are useful for practical activity. If our experience were not valid, we could never be sure that our perceptions corresponded to the facts. We would be like a man who, despite exhaustive examination, would still have to suspect that a rope might be a snake. No, the Shrutis here answer. The temporary configurations of matter are nonetheless an illusory imitation of the eternal spiritual reality, cleverly concocted to fulfill the conditioned living entity's desire for material activity. Vyavahitaye vikalpa ishita. The illusion of this world's permanence is sustained by a succession of blind men who learn the materialistic idea from their predecessors and pass on this illusion to their descendants. Anyone can see that an illusion often continues by the momentum of lingering mental impressions, even when its basis is no longer present. Thus, throughout history, blind philosophers have misled other blind men by convincing them of the absurd idea that they can reach perfection by engaging in mundane rituals. Foolish people may be willing to exchange counterfeit coins among one another, but a wise man knows that such money is useless for the practical business of buying food, medicine, and other necessities. And if given in charity, counterfeit money will earn no pious credit. But, say the Mimamsakas, how can the sincere performer of Vedic rituals be a deluded fool? Since the Samhitas and Brahmanas of the Vedic scriptures establish that the fruits of karma are eternal. For example, Akshayam ha vai chaturmasya yagya sakritam bhavati. For one who observes the chaturmasya vows, there arises inexhaustible good karma. And apama somam amrita bahuma, we have drunk the soma and become immortal. From the Rig Veda. The Shrutis reply, by pointing out that the personality of Godhead's learned words, comprising the Vedas, bewilder those whose weak intelligence has been crushed by the weight of too much faith in karma. The specific word used here is Uru Vritti, which indicates that the Vedic mantras, with their confusing variety of meanings in the semantic codes of Guna, Lakshana, and so on, protect their sublime mysteries from all but those who have faith in Lord Vishnu. The Vedas do not truly mean to say in their injunctions that the fruits of karma are eternal, but only indirectly describe in metaphors the praiseworthiness of regulated sacrifices. The Chandogya Upanishad states, in no uncertain terms, that the results of ritual karma are impermanent. Quote, just as whatever benefit one works hard to attain in this world is eventually depleted, so whatever life one earns for oneself in the next world by his piety will also eventually end. Testimony of numerous Shruti mantras, the entire material universe is but a temporary emanation of the Supreme Truth. The Mundaka Upanishad, for one, says, quote, as a web is expanded and withdrawn by a spider, as plants grow from the earth, and as hair grows from a living person's head and body, so this universe is generated from the inexhaustible Supreme. Srila Sridhar Swami prays, quote, although this world has arisen from you, who are the very substance of reality, it is not eternally real. The illusory snake appearing from a rope is not permanent reality, nor are the transformations produced from gold. The Vedas never say that they are. The actual, transcendental, non-dual reality is your supremely blissful personal kingdom. To that beautiful abode I offer my obeisances, O Lord Hari, to whom Goddess Indira always bows down. I also bow to you. Therefore, please, never release me. Hare Krishna. All glories to Sridhar Swami. Text 37. Translation. Since this universe did not exist prior to its creation and will no longer exist after its annihilation, we conclude that in the interim it is nothing more than a manifestation imagined to be visible within you, whose spiritual enjoyment never changes. We liken this universe to the transformation of various material substances into diverse forms. Certainly, those who believe that this figment of the imagination is substantially real are less intelligent. Purport. Having thus defeated all attempts of the ritualists to prove the substantial reality of material creation, the personified Vedas now present positive evidence to the contrary, that this world is unreal and that it is temporary. Before the creation of the universe and after its dissolution, only the spiritual reality of the Supreme Lord, along with his abode and entourage, continue to exist. The Shrutis confirm this. Atma va'idam eka evagra asid. Prior to the creation of this universe, only the self existed. Aitareya Upanishad. Na sadasin, no sadasit tadinam tadinim. At that time, neither the subtle nor the gross aspects of matter were present. Rig Veda. One can understand the relativity of creation by an analogy. When basic materials like clay and metal are processed and shaped into various products, the created objects exist separately from the clay and metal only in name, in form. The basic substance remains unchanged. Similarly, when the energies of the Supreme Lord are transformed into the known things of this world, these things exist separately from Him only in name and form. In the Chandogya Upanishad, the sage Uddalaka explains a similar analogy to his son. Quote, "For example, my dear boy, by understanding a simple lump of clay, one can understand everything made from clay. The existence of transformed products is only a creation of language, a matter of assigning designations. The clay alone is real." In conclusion, there is no convincing evidence that the things of this world are eternal or substantial, while there is overwhelming evidence that they are temporary and conditioned by false designations. Therefore, only the ignorant can take the imaginary permutations of matter to be real. Srila Sridhar Swami prays, "Transformations of gold, such as crowns, earrings, bangles, and ankle bells, are not ultimately separate from the gold itself. Similarly, the material elements headed by the Mahat, false ego, and ether are not ultimately separate from Lord Narahari." Text 38. The illusory material nature attracts the minute living entity to embrace her, and as a result he assumes forms composed of her qualities. Subsequently, he loses all his spiritual qualities and must undergo repeated deaths. You, however, avoid the material energy in the same way that a snake abandons its old skin. Glorious in your possession of 8 mystic perfections, you enjoy unlimited opulences. Purport: although the jiva is pure spirit, qualitatively equal with the Supreme Lord, he is prone to be degraded by embracing the ignorance of material illusion. When he becomes entranced by the allurements of Maya, he accepts bodies and senses that are designed to let him indulge in forgetfulness. Produced from the raw material of Maya's 3 modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, and nations, these bodies envelop the spirit soul in varieties of unhappiness, culminating in death and rebirth. The Supreme Soul and the individual soul share the same spiritual nature, but the Supreme Soul cannot be entrapped by ignorance like his infinitesimal companion. Smoke may engulf the glow of a small molten sphere of copper, covering its light in darkness, but the vast globe of the sun will never suffer the same kind of eclipse. Maya, after all, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead's faithful maidservant, the outward expansion of his internal Yogamaya potency. Sri Narada Pancharatna thus states in a conversation between Shruti and Vidya, quote, "The covering potency derived from her is Mahamaya, the regulator of everything material. The entire universe becomes bewildered by her, and thus every living being falsely identifies with his material body. Just as a snake casts aside his old skin, knowing that it is not part of his essential identity, so the Supreme Lord always avoids his external material energy. There is no insufficiency or limit to any of his 8-fold mystic opulences, consisting of anima, the power to become infinitesimal, mahima, the ability to become infinitely large, and so on. Therefore, the shadow of the material darkness has no scope for entering the domain of his unequaled, resplendent glories. For the sake of those whose renunciation of spiritual life is only gradually awakening, the Upanishads sometimes speak in general terms of Atma or Brahman, not openly distinguishing the difference between the superior and inferior souls, the Paramatma and the Jivatma. But often enough, they describe this duality in unequivocal terms. Quote, "Two companion birds sit together in the shelter of the same pipala tree. One of them is relishing the taste of the tree's berries, while the other refrains from eating and instead watches over his friend." Sri Tashatara Upanishad. In this analogy, the two birds are the soul and supersoul, the tree is the body, and the taste of the berries are the varieties of sense pleasure. Srila Swami prays. Srila Sridhar Swami prays. Quote, "The glance you cast upon your consort comprises time, the material propensities of living entities, and so on. This glance dances upon her face, thus awakening the multitude of created entities who take birth in the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. O Lord Nrihari, your Maya has put her foot on my head and is pressing down extremely hard, causing me great distress. Now I have come to you for shelter. Please make her desist." Hare Krishna. Okay, text 39. Members of the renounced order who fail to uproot the last traces of material desire in their hearts remain impure, and thus you do not allow them to understand you. Although you are present within their hearts, for them you are like a jewel worn around the neck of a man who has totally forgotten it is there. O Lord, those who practice yoga only for sense gratification must suffer punishment both in this life and in the next. From death, who will not release them, and from you, whose kingdom they cannot reach. Purport. A mere show of renunciation is not sufficient to gain a person entrance into the kingdom of God. One must undergo a thorough change of heart, symptomized by a complete lack of interest in the self-destructive habits of sense gratification, both gross and subtle. Not only must the true sage refrain from even thinking of illicit sex, meat-eating, intoxication, and gambling, but he must also give up his desires for reputation and position. Altogether, these demands add up to a formidable challenge, but the fruits of true renunciation and Krishna consciousness are well worth a lifetime of endeavor. Haribol. The Mundaka Upanishad confirms the statements of this verse, quote, even a thoughtful renunciate, if he maintains any worldly desires, will be forced by his karmic reactions to take birth again and again in various circumstances. Philosophers and yogis work hard to become free from birth and death, but because they are unwilling to surrender their proud independence, their meditations are devoid of devotion to the Supreme Lord, and thus they fall short of the perfection of renunciation, pure love of God. This pure love is the only goal of a sincere Vaishnava, and therefore he must vigilantly resist the natural temptations of profit, adoration, and distinction, and also the impulse to merge into an all-consuming impersonal oblivion. As Srila Rupa Goswami states in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Anyabhilashi tas shunyam jnana karma dhyanavritam anukulyena krishnanu shilanam bhaktir uttama. When first-class devotional service develops, one must be devoid of all material desires, knowledge obtained by monistic philosophy, and fruitive action. The devotee must constantly serve Krishna favorably as Krishna desires. For those who undergo rigorous yoga discipline only to please their senses, prolonged suffering is inevitable. Hunger, disease, the degeneration of old age, injury from accident, violence from others. These are a few of the limitless varieties of suffering one can experience to varying degrees in this world. And ultimately death awaits, followed by painful punishment for sinful activities. Especially those who have freely indulged in sensual enjoyment at the cost of others' lives can expect punishment so severe it is unimaginable. But the greatest pain of material existence is not misfortune in this life or being sent to hell after death. It is the emptiness of having forgotten one's eternal relationship with the personality of Godhead. Srila Sridhar Swami prays, the hypocrite who cheats himself by a pretense of renunciation thinks only of sense enjoyment and thus suffers constantly. Bewildered day and night, he is overwhelmed by the exhausting endeavors he contrives for himself. This fool disobeys your laws and is corrupted by greed for respect from other fools. O protector of the fallen, O bestower of mercy, O supremely blissful master, please save that person, myself. Sridhar Swami Ki Jai. Text 40. When a person realizes you, he no longer cares about his good and bad fortune arising from past pious and sinful acts, since it is you alone who control this good and bad fortune. Such a realized devotee also disregards what ordinary living beings say about him. Every day he fills his ears with your glories, which are recited in each age by the unbroken succession of Manu's descendants, and thus you become his ultimate salvation. Purport. Text 39 clearly states that the impersonalistic renunciates will continue to suffer birth after birth. One may ask if this suffering is justified, since a renunciate's status should exempt him from suffering. Whether or not he has a devotional attitude. I'll read that again. Text 39 clearly states that impersonalistic renunciates will continue to suffer birth after birth. One may ask if this suffering is justified, since a renunciate's status should exempt him from suffering, whether or not he has a devotional attitude. As the Shuddhi mantra states, quote, the perpetual glory of a Brahmana is never increased or diminished as a result of any of his activities. Aryanyak Upanishad. To counter the objection thus raised, the personified Vedas offer this prayer. Impersonalistic jnanis and yogis do not qualify for full relief from the reactions of karma, a privilege reserved only for those who are twad avagami, pure devotees, constantly engaged in hearing and chanting topics concerning the personality of Godhead. The devotees hold firm to the Supreme Lord's lotus feet by their unrelenting Krishna consciousness, and so they need not strictly adhere to the ritual commands and prohibitions of the Vedas. They can fearlessly ignore the apparent good and bad reactions of the work they do only for the Supreme Lord's pleasure. And they can equally ignore whatever others may say about them, whether praise or condemnation. A humble Vaishnava absorbed in the pleasure of Sankirtan, glorification of the Lord, pays little heed to praise of himself, which he assumes mistaken, and he happily accepts all criticism which he deems appropriate. One receives the authorized chanting of the Supreme Lord's glories by faithfully hearing from the sons of Manu, the disciplic succession of saintly Vaishnavas coming down through the ages. These sages emulate well the example of Swayambhuva Manu, the forefather of mankind. Quote, Although Swayambhuva's life gradually came to an end, his long life, consisting of a Manvantara era, was not spent in vain, since he always engaged in hearing, contemplating, writing down, and chanting the pastimes of the Lord. Even if a neophyte devotee falls from the standards of proper behavior by the force of his past bad habits, the all-merciful Lord will not reject him. As Lord Sri Krishna states, for those who live in Bhadrakrishna, the district of Mathura, I am the object of all worship. Even if the residents of that place fail to properly cultivate the religious principles that one should observe in the Holy Land, they still become devoted to me just by virtue of living there. Even if Kali, the present age of quarrel, has him in his grip, they still get credit for living in this place. My devotee who lives in Mathura is just as dear to me as you, Brahma, and your sons, Rudra, and his followers, and Goddess Shri, and my own self. Srila Sridhar Swami prays, O Madhava, please let me understand you so that I will no longer experience the entanglement of material pleasure and pain. Or else, just as good, please give me a taste for hearing and chanting about you. In that way, I will no longer be a slave to ritual injunctions. So this is extremely important purport because it emphasizes the goal of everything that we do in Krishna consciousness. The rules and regulations that we perform are meant to develop, to awaken our attachment for Krishna. If we follow rules and regulations just for the sake of following them, without consciously performing them in order to purify our hearts, so that we can awaken our love for Krishna, our attachment for Krishna, and His holy name, and His qualities, and the philosophy He teaches, and His holy pastimes, then we're actually wasting our time. From the very beginning of the Bhagavatam, this is stated. If we don't satisfy Krishna and develop our taste of happiness from serving Krishna, then whatever we're doing, we're wasting our time. Shama eva, hi kevalam. Text 41. Because you are unlimited, neither the lords of heaven nor even you yourself can ever reach the end of your glories. The countless universes, each enveloped in its shell, are compelled by the wheel of time to wander within you like particles of dust blowing about in the sky. The Shrutis, following their method of eliminating everything separate from the Supreme, become successful by revealing you as their final conclusion. Purport. Now, in their last prayer, the personified Vedas draw the conclusion that all Shrutis, by the various literal and metaphorical references, ultimately describe the Supreme Personality of Godhead's identity, personal qualities, and powers. The Upanishads glorify him without end. Quote, "My dear daughter of Garga, his greatness encompasses everything above us in heaven, everything below the surface of the earth, everything in between heaven and earth, and everything that has ever existed, exists now, or will ever exist." That's the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad. To illuminate the meaning of this final prayer by the Shrutis, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur presents the following conversation between Lord Narayana and the personified Vedas. The Vedas said, "Lord Brahma and the other rulers of the heavenly planets have not yet reached the end of your glories. What can we do then, since we are insignificant in comparison to these great demigods?" Lord Narayana replied, "No, you Shrutis are gifted with more sublime vision than the demigods who rule this universe. You will be able to reach the end of my glories if you do not stop now. But even you cannot find your own limit. If that is the case, what do you mean when you call me omniscient and omnipotent? We conclude that you possess these features from the very fact that you are limitless. Certainly, if one is ignorant of something that does not even exist, like a rabbit's horn, that does not detract from his omniscience. And if one fails to find such a non-entity, that does not limit his omnipotence. You are so vast that multitudes of universes float within you. Each of these universes is surrounded by 7 shells composed of the material elements, and each of these concentric shells is 10 times larger than the one within it. Although we can never fully describe the truth about you, we perfect our existence by declaring that you are the true object of the Vedas. But why do you seem dissatisfied? Because in the Vedas, Srila Vyasadeva has described the transcendental existence of Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagavan only briefly. When he saw the need to elaborate on his description of the Supreme, he chose to concentrate on the subject of Brahman, the impersonal aspect of the Supreme known as Tat, that, explaining Brahman by negating whatever is different from it. Just as in a field where a chest of jewels has been accidentally spilled, the jewels can be recovered by removing unwanted stones, twigs, and refuse. So within the visible realm of Maya and her creations, the absolute truth can be found by a process of elimination. Since we Vedas cannot possibly enumerate every material category, individual entity, quality, and motion in the universe from the beginning to the end of time, and since the truth concerning Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan would still remain untouched, even if we described all these things and then discarded them, by this means of investigation, we never expect to reach a final definition of you. Only by your mercy can we make some attempt to approach you, the supremely inaccessible absolute truth. There are many statements of Shruti that carry on the work of atan nirasanam, the process of distinguishing the Supreme from everything inferior. The Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, for example, states, quote, "It is neither big nor small, short nor long, hot nor cool, in shadow nor in darkness, nor it is the wind or the ether. It is not in contact with anything, and it has no taste, smell, eyes, ears, motion, potency, life, air, pleasure, measurement, inside or outside." The Kena Upanishad, quote, "Brahman is distinct from what is known and also from what is yet to be known." And the Katha Upanishad says, quote, "Brahman is outside the scope of religion and irreligion, pious and impious action." According to the rules of linguistics and logic, a negation cannot be unbounded. There must be some positive counterpart of which it is the negation. In the case of the Vedas, exhaustive atan nirasanam, their denial that anything material is absolutely real, the counterpart is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. Srila Sridhar Swami prays, "The gods of heavens do not know your limit, O endless Lord, and even you do not know it, because the transcendental words of the topmost Shrutis become fruitful by revealing you. I offer you my obeisances. Thus I worship you as the absolute truth, saying, all glories to you, all glories to you." Text 42. The Supreme Lord Sri Narayana Rishi said, having heard these instructions about the Supreme Self, the personality of Godhead, the sons of Brahma now understood their final destination. They felt perfectly satisfied and honored Sanandana with their worship. Purport. Srila Jiva Goswami explains that Atmanushananam, Atmanushashanam, can be understood both as instructions given to benefit the Jiva souls and as instructions about the living entity's relationship with the foundation of all existence. Similarly, Atmanogatim means both the destination of the Jiva soul and the means of reaching the Supreme Soul. By hearing the 28 prayers of the personified Vedas, which comprise the elucidation of the Brahmopanishad spoken at the beginning of this chapter, the sages assembled in Brahmaloka made great progress toward their goal of pure love of God. Text 43. Thus the ancient saints who travel in the upper heavens distilled this nectarian and confidential essence of all the Vedas and Puranas. Text 44. And as you wander the earth at will, my dear son of Brahma, you should faithfully meditate on these instructions concerning the science of the self, which burn up the material desires of all men. Purport. Narada, the son of Brahma, heard this account from Sri Narayana Rishi. The epithet Brahmadhyaya, the epithet Brahmadhyada, also means that Narada attained Brahman effortlessly, just as if it were his inherited birthright. 45. Shukadeva Goswami said, when Sri Narayana Rishi ordered him in this way, the self-possessed sage Narada, whose vow is as heroic as the warriors, accepted the command with firm faith. Now successful in all his purposes, he thought. Now successful in all his purposes, he thought about what he had heard, O king, and replied to the Lord as follows. Text 46. Sri Narada said, I offer my obeisances to him of spotless fame, the Supreme Lord Krishna, who manifests his all-attractive personal expansions so that all living beings can achieve liberation. Purport. Srila Sridhar Swami remarks that Narada's addressing Sri Narayana Rishi as an incarnation of Lord Krishna is perfectly appropriate in accordance with the following statement of Srimad-Bhagavatam. Eti chang shakala pungsang pungsa Krishnas tu Bhagavan Swayam. All of the above-mentioned incarnations, including Narayana Rishi, are either plenary portions or portions of the plenary portions of the Lord. But Lord Sri Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. In his commentary on this verse, Srila Vishwanath Chakrabarti has Lord Narayana Rishi asking, why do you offer obeisances to Krishna instead of me, your guru, who am standing here before you? Narada explains his action by saying that Lord Krishna assumes all attractive incarnations, like Sri Narayana Rishi, to end the conditioned soul's material life. By offering obeisances to Lord Krishna, therefore, Narada honors Narayana Rishi and all other manifestations of Godhead as well. This prayer of Narada's is the essential nectar he has extracted from the personified Vedas prayers, which themselves were churned from the sweet ocean of all secrets of the Vedas and Puranas. As the Gopaltapani Upanishad recommends, quote, "Therefore Krishna is the supreme Godhead. One should meditate upon him, relish the taste of reciprocating loving exchanges with him, worship him, and offer sacrifice to him." Text 47. Shukadeva Goswami continued. After saying this, Narada bowed down to Sri Narayana Rishi, the foremost of sages, and also to his saintly disciples. He then returned to the hermitage of my father, Dvaipayana Vyas. Text 48. Vyasadeva, the incarnation of the personality of Godhead, respectfully greeted Narada Muni and offered him a seat, which he accepted. Narada then described to Vyas what he had heard from the mouth of Sri Narayana Rishi. Thus I have replied to the question you asked me, O King, concerning how the mind can have access to the absolute truth, which is indescribable by material words and devoid of material qualities. Text 50. He is the Lord who eternally watches over this universe, who exists before, during, and after its manifestation. He is the master of both the unmanifest material energy and the spirit soul. After sending forth the creation, he enters within it, accompanying every living entity. There he creates the material bodies and then remains as their regulator. By surrendering to him, one can escape the embrace of illusion, just as a dreaming person forgets his own body. One who wants liberation from fear should constantly meditate upon him, Lord Hari, who is always on the platform of perfection and thus never subject to material birth. Purport. By glancing upon the dormant universe at the time of sending forth the jiva souls into creation, the Supreme Lord provides all their necessities. For those living entities who are fruitive workers, he provides the intelligence and senses needed to achieve success in material work. For those who seek transcendental knowledge, he provides the intelligence by which they can merge into the spiritual effulgence of God, thus attaining liberation. And for the devotees, he provides the understanding that leads them to his pure devotional service. To arrange for these varied facilities, the Lord impels material nature to begin the process of universal evolution. Thus the Lord is the nimitta karanam, or effective cause of creation. He is also the upadana karanam, the ingredient cause, inasmuch as everything emanates from him, and he alone is constantly present before, during, and after the manifestation of created cosmos. Lord Narayana himself states this in his Chatushloki Bhagavatam. Aham evasame vagre nanyad yat sarasat param paschad aham yareta cha yobashishet tisosmyaham. It is I, the personality of Godhead, who was existing before the creation, when there was nothing but myself, nor was there material nature, the cause of this creation. That which you see now is also I, the personality of Godhead, and after annihilation, what remains will also be I, the personality of Godhead. Primeval Maya and the Jiva soul may deserve the respective titles of Upadana and nimitta causes of creation in a relative sense, but the Lord, after all, is the origin of both of them. Until he chooses to accept the mercy of the personality of Godhead, the jiva soul is anushayi, helplessly bound up in the embrace of illusion. When he turns to the Lord's worship, he becomes anushayi in a different sense, fallen like a rod to pay obeisances at the lotus feet, at the Lord's feet. By that surrender, the soul easily casts illusion aside. Even though the liberated soul may still seem to be living in a material body, the connection he has with it is only an external appearance. He pays no more regard to it than a sleeping man pays to his body while busily engaged far, far away in his dream world. One gives up ignorance by abandoning false identification with one's material body. Sometimes one may achieve this state only by a severe effort that takes many lifetimes. But in some cases, the Lord may show special consideration for one he favors, regardless of how little credit that soul may have earned by regulated practice. In the words of Sri Bhishmadev, Yamiha niriksha hatha gatak sarupam. Those who simply saw Krishna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra attained their original forms after being killed. That even demons like Aga, Baka, and Keshi were liberated by Lord Krishna without having performed any spiritual practices is an indication of his unique position as the original personality of Godhead. Knowing this, we should put aside all fear and doubt and give ourselves fully to the process of devotional service. As his final words of commentary on this chapter, Srila Sridhar Swami writes, Sarva Shruti Shiroratna Nira Jita Padam Bhujam Bhoga Yoga Padam Vande Madhavam Karmas Nam Rayoho. With their effulgence, the crest jewels among all the Shrutis offer arati to the lotus feet of Lord Madhava. I pay homage to him who bestows the material enjoyment honored by material workers, and who also gains the divine connection with him prized by those who bow down to him with reverence. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also takes this opportunity to offer this humble prayer. Hey Bhakta Dvaryayam Cha Chad Chan Chad Valadi Rautivo Manak Prasadam Labatam Tasmat Vishishtak Shveshanatati. O devotees, this poor creature is standing at your doorway, waving his tail and barking. Please let him have a little prasadam, so that he may become exceptional among dogs and get the best of masters as his owner. Here the Acharya makes a pun on his own name, Vish, Ishta, exceptional, Shwa, Iva, like a dog, Nata, Ati, having a master. Such is the perfection of Vaishnava, humility. Thus end the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to the 10th canto, 87th chapter of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, entitled The Prayers of the Personified Vedas. Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna, thanks a lot. So, we just finished in 3 days. 3 days or 4 days? 4 days. 5 days. The Prayers of Personified Vedas. It is the longest chapter in the Srimad-Bhagavatam. It is extremely well written. The purports were systematically wonderful. And what we can learn in a general sense about this chapter is, and an important, very important point, is that the goal is to develop spiritual emotion. I couldn't help but notice, I'm reflecting just a little bit now before I turn it over to my audience. Sridhar Swami, 2 or 3 times in his prayers, ended up at the end of the prayer, Jai, O Lord, Jai, O Lord. Meaning that was his emotion coming out. But as Prabhupada taught us, emotion untempered by understanding, by proper understanding, becomes just a, how you would say, a vacant ritual, shallow and unsatisfying. Just like if you flatter someone for some quality they don't have, for example, it's an insult. It's not a praise, it's an insult. This was stated by Prithu Maharaj when he first was churned from the body of Bena, and all the citizens saw, oh, this must be an incarnation of Krishna. So they started praising him for his glorious qualities. And his response was, don't praise me. I haven't done anything. I just arrived here. Hold your praise until you find out really who I am by what I do. So it's not what you know, it's who you are. Isn't it? And therefore we should praise Krishna in all cases, under all circumstances. But as was stated in one of the purports, it's also responsibility of the disciple to inquire intelligently, to learn, what the philosophy is, and therefore to be able to give service to the spiritual master and to Krishna in a meaningful, glorious way. Just as the Lord is glorious, so are those devotees who serve the Lord with full knowledge of His glories and transcend them in that way, not to jump to the Lord and try to glorify, oh Jai, Jai, oh Lord, without any understanding of what they're doing. So we pray to the personified Vedas, the most learned persons in the universe, for their blessings and their benedictions, that we can understand what we just read. Luckily, the books are there. These readings have been very nice. At least I've enjoyed them very much. And we can go back to them and hear them again and again and try to understand, discuss them among ourselves. And in this way, as Srila Prabhupada said toward the end of his pastimes with us, just go on discussing Srimad-Bhagavatam among yourselves, and everything will remain clear. Hare Krishna. So, do we have any reflections or questions or anything? I'm going to fly early in the morning tomorrow. I have a flight. I have to leave here early before 6 o'clock. So I have some packing to do and things to organize. So I'm not going to go very late tonight. But if there are any reflections coming from those who are watching, who tuned in, please, we beg you to share it with us. We can share them with everyone else. How are we doing?
Really good.
Any comments or?
Just writing to them to.
Right.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Sridhar Swami ki jai. His comments were always at the end of it. Did you notice how nicely organized all these commentaries were, purports? So systematic and, Jiva Goswami or Vishwanath, especially Vishwanath, Chakravarti Thakur, and at the end Sridhar Swami, so loyal to Prabhupada's system, so loyal to Prabhupada's way, so loyal to his thoughts, transparent to the glories of the Lord. Prabhupada wanted us to read the whole Bhagavatam, so here we are, going to enter soon into the 11th and 12th cantos, compiled by our glorious godbrothers, Srila Prabhupada's disciples, empowered literature. Anybody who reads them sincerely in the company of other devotees, it's transparent, it's self-effulgent, transcendental literature. Hare Krishna. Okay, thank you very much. I'm on the road tomorrow. I'll be in Dallas, Texas, which is 6 hours behind us. So those of you who are tuning in the UK, it'll be around noontime, 12:30, something like that, when the live broadcast is done. But now that we have this one site, we can read them anytime. We have a comment by Sudevi Dasi. At first I had strong emotions, but without knowledge. It was sentimentality. However, I got attached to the association and power of the devotees. Made me a devotee. Yes, and that point was made repeatedly, wasn't it, in the prayers to the personified Vedas. It was talking about how, the personified Vedas themselves says we are the example, we are the evidence of how transcendental knowledge and association with pure Vaishnavas can make us devotees. Thank you, Sudevi Dasi. Rati Manjari, around noontime, interesting, smile. Okay, Rati, how's the sound now? We got our new microphone. I hope it's up to your standard. Well, it was hiding behind my cloth, actually. I could fix it better. Anyway, we're going forward. We're getting a little better and a little better. If I can find the best equipment when I go to America, I will. Anyway, everyone, thank you so much. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to Srimad-Bhagavatam. We're on for a very long ride. We're going to read the whole Bhagavatam every day. Then when we get done, we're going to read the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita together. When we get done with that, we're going to read the Bhagavad Gita together. Then we're going to read the Bhagavatam together. And we're going to go on and on this joyful ride back to Godhead for the rest of our lives. Hare Krishna. Gaura Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol.